Ok.
Até lá atrás, uns 20 e poucos segundos.
Tá.
I don't have it either. I lent mine. I lent mine to someone else.
No problem, no problem. I will look for a minute if I have it, but if not, I have it in many languages, but no, it's Italian. So I'll tell you what, I will show it in Hebrew.
I don't have it either. I lent mine. I lent mine to someone else.
Okay.
I don't have it
no
either.
problem.
I
no
lent
problem.
mine. I lent mine to someone else.
But if not, no problem. No. I look for a minute if I have it, but if not, I have it in many languages, but no, Italian. So I'll tell you what, I will show it in Hebrew.
I don't have it either.
So I'll tell
I
you
lent
what, I will
mine.
show it
I lent mine to someone else. I lent mine. I lent mine to someone else.
Tá repetindo o texto?
Shani, there's gonna be problems.
I languages. No. So I'll tell you what, I will show it in
Ela abriu o YouTube.
Hebrew.
Oh,
I lent. I lent. I lent mine. I lent
Dela, tá vendo?
hã?
Tá saindo do professor da Fania.
A Fania abriu o YouTube?
Eu acho que ela abriu o YouTube, aquela página.
Fania? Fania, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
I think you have your YouTube open. If you can close it.
I closed mine.
Tá saindo do professor.
Only the YouTube connection. You keep only the Hangout.
Okay.
Otherwise, we have this echo going on back and forth.
Yes, it was like a rap music,
Yes.
a rap song. We are online and we are fine. We can begin.
Vamos ver essa das.
All right. So good morning. Good morning, everybody. So it's a pleasure to start the activities of Pinat Brasil. É um prazer começar a estrear as atividades do Pinat Brasil. Obrigado a todos por terem vindo. Welcome everybody. I know there are some folks are in Jerusalem, some folks in New York, and some people here in Brazil. Today we'll have a pleasure to have Fania Oz-Salzberger. She's a historian in Haifa University. Her father is the writer Amos Oz, and her grandmother was also a historian, as we know from the tales of Love and Darkness. And what we talked with Fania for our talk today is perhaps to cover a little bit of her new book with her father, Jews and Words, and of course we'll be open to continue in any other subject that we want. So we have total freedom to cover from religion to politics to whatever we want. And after that, we'll start with some questions. We have some people in the Hangout, Michelle and Noemi. And after that, we'll open the Q&A for everybody who is online. Okay? So, Fania, thank you again and welcome.
Hi, Charles. Bom dia. Como vai? Not much Portuguese here, I'm afraid, but I'm very happy to be here with you and with our friends and with the audience, of course. And we will shoot your questions, and I will do my best to shoot back my answers.
Perfect. So, okay. Why don't you start having a little bit of the idea of the book of Jews and Words? I think it would be a great way to start with to engage our audience.
The book Jews and Words, co-authored by myself and my father, Amos, looks like this. I'm showing it to you because the cover is interesting. This is the Hebrew version, Yehudim Umilim. I think the Portuguese version looks exactly the same. Big armchair, small armchair. The big one is old, the small one is new, and the book is between them. I got a lot of fire from feminists who asked me, how come you are sitting in a small armchair? My father's answer is that he is sitting in a small armchair. But really, the thesis of the book is very much in this wonderful picture that our Yale University Press graphic designer made for us. It's about what keeps the Jews going if there is no God. The book has three purposes. One of them is to have a father and daughter experience in writing a book together. The second one is no less than to explain, offer our explanation to the miracle or riddle, mystery of Jewish continuity.
Tá falhando.
Third option is get into political fights.
Escuta você também. Lá. Quer que eu te mande?
Now, please
Não.
let me know.
Falhando. Né? Você não quer assistir? Certo.
Guys, are you there?
So, suggestion to everybody who is listening to to Fania, if you can mute your mic so that Fania will not be interrupted. Okay?
Yes, mine is muted.
Okay. Michelle?
I think mine is mute also.
Okay. Thanks.
This is very un-Jewish, you know, to have everybody's mics muted except mine, because I'm not used to speak without being interrupted by my audience. So I look forward to interruptions later. There's something not Jewish about this situation. So the first, can I continue? Is that all right?
Yes, yes.
The first challenge to write a book together, father and daughter, I can only tell you that I do not recommend to anybody to do this before the age of 50. After you are 50, you can do it. But yes, it is a book by a father and a daughter. It's also a book by members of two very different generations. He is old, I'm young. He dislikes computers and hates the internet. He thinks it is the end of civilization. I love computers. I enjoy the internet. And I think it's the beginning of a new civilization. We argued a lot when we wrote this book about the meaning of the internet for human people. I'm going to get back to that. It is also a book by a writer, a novelist, and a historian. So he is in charge. Now, at this point, I would like to make sure that everybody can hear me.
Now then.
Now you can?
Yes.
Oh, I can see wonderful people on my small screen. Now, also a man and a woman wrote this book, and so the question of women in Jewish history is quite powerful, not just for me, but also for me. And we kept quarreling and disagreeing and then interviewing. Some of them are, I think, very noticeable in the book. Let me just decline phone calls. Just 1 second.
Não sou eu.
Você pode desativar a câmera se quiser.
Visualizado.
Você ativou a câmera, você sabe.
Para as pessoas verem que eu tô, não tá todo mundo ativando.
Você precisa pôr o teu microfone no mute, pra gente não te ouvir falando.
Now, can we continue? I shall wait for the site to continue, if that's all right. Charles, are you with me? Can you hear me? No, I can't hear you.
That's because I was on mute. But yes, I can hear you perfectly.
So shall I continue? I'm just waiting for you to continue. How did the Jews survive 3 millennia if there is no God? And we are assuming that there is no God. We are secular Jews, Israelis. We are very Jewish, but without God. It is totally possible and doable, and this is part of the argument of this book, to be a non-believer, to be an agnostic or an atheist, and yet to be deeply Jewish. Because being Jewish is not a religion, not only a religion, it is also a different kind of belonging. And the kind of belonging I would like to suggest, or we would like to suggest, is called textual nationhood. It is belonging to a nation through being part of its library, through living in its library. Now, I assume that many of the listeners are not believers either, but if they are equally welcome to listen to the kind of idea that I would like to present here. Okay, now I'm not sure whether I should continue or stop at this point, because I am not seeing my interviewers, so I shall give it a little recess, another little recess, until I...
Oh, Fania, I turned off everybody's cameras so that the connection is better.
Okay, I would like, if I may, I would like to see at least you, Charles, because I cannot see what's going on.
Okay, okay. I'll turn myself on. Okay.
I will keep talking, not a problem at all. Usually I can hear my listeners and they're not mute, so we shall, okay, now it's fine. Let me continue. If there is no Jehovah in heaven, then we have a very unusual situation in which a very ancient civilization, more ancient than the Chinese and the Indians and the Greeks and the Romans, is still around in a way which can be considered continuity. That means that young children growing up with the Hebrew language are able to read, with some help perhaps, the book of Genesis, or the book of Joshua, or the Song of Songs. And this is a pretty wonderful thing, bordering on the miraculous. It has to be explained. Of course, there were civilizations more ancient than the Israelite civilization. We had Egypt, ancient Egypt, we had Assyria, we had Babylonia, but they are not around anymore. People don't make love in Assyrian or in Latin anymore. People do make love in Hebrew today. And the question is, how did we pull it off without intervention from heavens? The answer that we would like to suggest is the following. The ancient Hebrews, the Israelites, the Jews, the names kept rolling, but it is essentially the same textual nation, is not necessarily the same biological nation. I don't know whether the blood in my veins belongs to ancient Hebrews or ancient Greeks or Cossacks or Khuzars, and I don't care either. Textually, in terms of living in an ongoing, unrolling library, we belong to the same nation, to the same civilization. And this civilization flew from the ancient to the modern, to the postmodern world on two engines. One engine was the children, and the other engine were the books. And the meeting point between the children and the books took place when the boys were 3 years old. Every Jewish boy, since the book of Deuteronomy, we don't know for sure whether everybody obeyed it, but all the records we have do not show any male illiteracy in ancient Jewish, modern Jewish communities. Every Jewish boy at the age of 3 is taken by his mother and father to the melamed, to the teacher, to the cheder, to the little schoolroom. And there he is given his first alphabet, and every Jewish culture gave the children, on top of the alphabet, some sweets. It could be marcipans in North Africa, it could be raisins and almonds in East Europe, it could be specially designed sweets in Yemen, and sometimes also honey. The parents and the teacher would spread honey on the letters of the alphabet. This was a secret. Now I would like the rest of the world to know. My message is, when your kid gets her or his first iPad at the age of 3, try to spread honey on their iPad. They might end up loving to read and write. This Jewish secret was sociologically significant. By the way, I'm not trying an exercise in Jewish triumphalism here to say how much better we were than others. I'm not sure we were better than others in any measure. But there was something about early universal literacy and keeping it in the family, which went a long way. You see, a brilliant child, a little boy, in ancient Egypt, in ancient China, in ancient Greece, very brilliant. If he was lucky enough to be recognized as brilliant by his teachers, he did not stay at home. He did not stay in his village. He went away. He was sent to the mandarins. He was sent to Socrates in Athens. He never came back to his family and village. He became a Catholic priest, away from home. Jewish communities managed, strangely enough, to keep the bright boys at home, to have the boy return every evening from the schoolroom, literally or metaphorically, with the book under his arm. And because he brought the book home, or at least books were expensive, he brought literacy home, his clever sister could learn to read as well. His mother could learn to read as well. This also amounts not just for the universal literacy of Jewish men from ancient times, but also for the significant literacy of Jewish women. The stories were passed in written form. It's not only folklore. Every culture has folklore. It's not only singing and storytelling by the fire. Every culture has singing and storytelling by the fire. This was something different. They passed on a written library, a collection of texts. And these texts also had inbuilt the instructions how to use them and how to pass them on to the kids. And so, to put it very briefly, the ancient Jewish suggestion to the modern world, to the 21st century, if you want your kids to be readers, to love books, and to continue your own stories in their ways, catch them when they are young. Spread honey on their iPads or screens or books when they're 3. Make them love it when they're small. Second secret, several secrets. Second secret, argument is good. You do not mute your audience. Your audience is supposed to interrupt and ask difficult questions. A Jewish child traditionally was taught not to disobey, but to disagree intelligently with father, with teacher, with the rabbi, sometimes with God Almighty. Jewish history is quite full of people who argue against authority and even against God himself, from Abraham via Job, all the way to modernity. We argue. We do not respect by silently listening and obeying. We ask tough questions because tough questions are good. This is not the Catholic catechism. These are not rhetorical questions. These are, in Hebrew, kushiyot, tough ones, like hard nuts. You are supposed to embarrass your rabbi with a difficult question. You know, this secret explains a great deal about Israel today, about the level and the volume of Israeli argument today. It is almost impossible to tell Israelis to be quiet when they discuss politics or indeed anything else. They will have more opinions than people in the room. We all know the jokes. The jokes are true and quite ancient. A third secret. How many secrets do you want, Charles? I have quite a few. As many, keep them coming. Third secret are strong women. We have a chapter in English called Vocal Women, about the way that biblical women were very, very tough ladies in different ways, but we have dozens of very tough women in the Bible. And unlike the Greek ladies, who are also tough in their way, the Greek ladies are either goddesses or tragic figures. Medea, Antigone. The ancient Hebrew women are neither goddesses nor tragic figures. They are in the business of life and not death, of survival and not extinction. And they are basically in the different business of motherhood, having kids, but not just physically, also intellectually. Having kids means passing the story on. What is more important, the child or the story? The one engine or the second engine? And the answer is that both are equally important, because there will be no continuity without the children and the stories. And so you have biblical heroines, very strong, opinionated ladies, like the 6 women, no less than 6 women, who worked as a team to save a baby. That baby was Moses. That baby was Moses. And if you open the second book of the Bible, Sefer Shmot, first chapter, you will read the amazing story of how this baby was saved by 6 brave ladies. By the way, 4 of them were Hebrews. One of them was Egyptian, the princess, the daughter of Pharaoh, and her servant, whose nationality, whose ethnic group we do not know. The 4 Hebrews, 2 midwives, and the mother and sister of Moses, together conspired to save children in generally when Pharaoh wanted to kill all the firstborn boys, but also to save this specific baby in an ingenious way. They used technology, I would say high-tech by biblical standards. They used communication. They communicated with the Egyptian princess, who then took the baby and adopted him. This was a life-saving effort of the father of the nation by no less than 6 women, Hebrew and not Hebrew. And the one absent figure in all of this is the father. The father of Moses is nowhere to be found. We know him. His name was Amram. He is not around. The rabbis later, many hundreds of years later, said that the father was speaking to God in the desert. My explanation was that the father was in the pub when his wife and daughter saved his baby son. So you need strong women. Any civilization that depends on children and texts for its survival can do with a lot of strong women who interpret motherhood, parenthood, not just in a biological way. So the biological is the least important here. Not just in a physical way, not even just feeding, despite the wonderful chicken soup and Jewish motherly cooking. By the way, Jewish food is also a text full of memories and associations. But Jewish parenting was always somewhat intellectual. And I believe that intellectual parenting is what we are going to increasingly need globally in the coming century. We shall need to teach our children well, to quote a favorite song of mine. Teach them well. We cannot leave them to accident. We cannot leave them to the labyrinth of the internet. They need to swim with us before they swim alone, and they need to read with us before they read alone. The last secret for today, Charles, is humor, Jewish humor. Now this is well known, but still we need to revisit Jewish humor. It's not all about Woody Allen. The first laughter in the Bible happens when Mother Sarah laughs in the face of God himself when he tells her that she's going to have a baby at the age of 80-something. She laughs, God is offended, they argue like kindergarten kids. The Bible can be a very funny book sometimes. Jewish tradition allows to laugh at everything. We in Israel do it. We laugh at the rabbis, at the prime ministers, at God Almighty. We laugh even about the Holocaust. There is no disaster or tragedy or human situation that we cannot laugh about. You know, there is no authority that we cannot laugh about. And unlike certain monotheistic religions, other monotheistic religions, whom I shall not name, but I can think of at least 2 such monotheistic religions, it is fine to laugh at the greatest authorities. Rabbi, prophet, God Almighty. It's okay. God can laugh back. He can take it. Let me now, if I may, Charles, get to the politics before we open up to questions from the audience, because this is not just an exercise of understanding Jewish continuity. It is not just a reflection on parenthood in general, Jewish parenthood, intellectual parenting, the dialogue in the family that we exemplified when writing this book. There is more to this book, and this book has a few agendas. To be more specific, I think that we are lashing out both towards the right and towards the left in different ways. Some critics of Israel have been saying in recent years that there is no such thing as a Jewish nation. The Jews were always a religion, not a nation. Ancient history proves nothing could be a legend or a myth. It is only in the 19th century, with the rise of nationalism, that the Zionists, who were creepy creatures, managed to convince some Jews that they are a nation and deserve to go back to the land of Israel, and this was a crime against the Arabs, or perhaps a crime against humanity. There is no such thing as a Jewish nation, so it does not deserve a country of its own. Our book strongly suggests that there is a Jewish nation and that it is textually linked to the land of Israel very deeply. However, we are not in the business of nationalism. We are not in the business of proving that we are better or finer than other nations. We are not a chosen people for us. We think that our kind of nationhood could suggest something for the 21st century. It is a textual nationhood. Yes, it needs a land and an army, because otherwise the Gentiles get into the strange habit of killing us occasionally. We do need a land and an army. But ours is not a bloodline, but a text line. We are put together by texts, by a common language or several common languages, Hebrew, Yiddish, Ladino, and other languages of the Jews, and by a common, huge and expanding library. So if anybody wants to join, they're more than welcome. This is our view of being Jewish and being part of a Jewish nation. At the same time, we are lashing out against right-wing nationalism, obviously, and also against ultra-Orthodoxy. Because the ultra-Orthodox Jews of today in Israel and elsewhere believe that women should be silently at home. We argue throughout this book that throughout Jewish history, from the ancient Hebrews to modernity, Jewish women were not in the business of being silently at home. They were in the business of being outdoors, sometimes in the public sphere, sometimes in court, sometimes leaders, political or military, but more often exercising an extremely active motherhood or family life in a leading style rather than a submissive one. And women always spoke. The Bible is full of singing, dancing, song-making women, and the poetry the Bible tells us was written and sung by women is far more interesting than the poetry written and sung by men. We have a little idea about who wrote the Song of Songs, but in order to find out who, you will need to read the book Jews and Words. And so, of course, we've had a lot of backlashes, both from the left and from the right in Israel after publishing the book. And I will tell you just one of the funny anecdotes coming from the ultra-Orthodox side. We had quite a few letters from ultra-Orthodox men, also from rabbis who wrote to us about the book, found it very interesting. But one day I was on an airplane, an Al plane, before takeoff from London back to Tel Aviv, and a huge rabbi, huge both physically and apparently in his status, came in, very, very ultra-Orthodox, and refused to sit next to me where he was supposed. There was a big row in the airplane. Finally, he had to sit next to me. And after the plane took off, I raised my glass of water and said, "Rabbi, I know you didn't want to sit next to me, but I wish you a happy flight." Upon which he opened his mouth to answer. I opened my mouth back to answer, and we never stopped talking until we landed in Ben Gurion Airport, and I think it was the happiest flight in his life, or at least one of the most interesting flights in his life. We exchanged views about being a secular Jew and being a Orthodox Jew. We compared our knowledge. It turned out that he knows the Talmud much better than I do, but that I seem to know the Bible better than he does. So that was a very interesting exchange. You know, kibbutz education used to be beautifully biblical in the old days. After we landed, and I told him about the book I wrote with my father, I knew his name, and I knew the name of the yeshiva in Bnei Brak, which he was heading, so I sent him a book, Jews and Words, with a dedication, and didn't expect an answer. 2 weeks later comes an email. Now, you know, getting an email from the office of a rabbi in Bnei Brak is more or less like getting a WhatsApp message from Plato. They don't do emails. And the email was not from him, it was from his secretary, of course, a male secretary. "Dear Professor Oz-Salzberger, the rabbi would like to thank you very heartily for sending him your book. Unfortunately, he shall not read your book because he believes that your worldview and your understanding of Judaism is contradictory to his own understanding of Judaism. Respectfully yours, M. Natanzon, Secretary." I showed this email to my father. I said it was very polite of them, but how unfortunate that the rabbi is not reading our book. My father said to me, "Fania, make no mistake. Not only is the rabbi reading our book cover to cover, but even more importantly, his wife is reading our book." So interesting things are going to happen in Israel, are already beginning to happen in Israel in regard to the inner dialogue about what is being Jewish all about. But at this point, I would like to cut my own speech and allow the listeners or you to read out questions from listeners if we have them, or from our other interlocutors. So I'm all ears.
Thank you, Fania. I think there is some questions are coming up just in a second, and perhaps some people in the Hangout will also want to make some questions. I will start with one just for a warm up. So while you answer mine, people will be warming up for their questions as well. So my question is about the perspective of being a secular Jew in Israel, right? And specifically the way that Israel was founded, and then how religion evolved in Israel, and how religion and politics became more and more entangled. Seems to be a very particular context to understand how Judaism has evolved, and particularly when I hear you on your historical analysis of Judaism, on specifically how it is in Judaism all right to challenge authority from time to time within the Judaism. It seems to me that when we look at Israel at this point, and when we see the ultra-Orthodox at this point, it seems to me that the relationship with authority might not be exactly the same that you described that it existed in the past. So I'd love to hear you elaborate a little bit how these authorities evolved in Israel, and how you see that for the future.
Well, you know, Charles, I was born in a kibbutz in the early 60s, in a place that still took itself to be part of the leading avant-garde of Zionism and Israeli society, the young state of Israel. Before its foundation, the pioneers, the Zionist beginners, the people who fired up the whole thing were mostly secular, and many of them has a socialist, social democrat orientation. So we thought we were part of the majority and the leadership, and so we were until the 70s. As I was growing up, things changed in Israel demographically and politically, partially because of the Six-Day War and the miraculous conquest of biblical landscapes. And my part of Israeli society, first of all the kibbutz, and then the rest of the central left, liberal, secular, global-oriented part of Israeli society, that is Tel Aviv, found themselves in the minority, found themselves still being called the old elites and still leading the judiciary and some of the finances and so on, but having lost political power. This was a bad shock for people in the late 70s when Likud, Menachem Begin, took over. I think it was not a bad thing at all that Likud took over then, in the sense that Israel had been essentially a one-party government until then, or a one leadership state until then. But nowadays, we are in the midst of a cultural war of sorts between left and right, religious and secular, partially overlapping, of course, nationalist and liberal, inward-looking and globalized Israelis. I'm trying to make my own way as a very self-conscious Jew and Israeli, who does not need the whole land in order to make herself at home, who is happy to share it with the Palestinians, who does not need geography to support history. We have enough history, and we can do with a very small geography. So yes, my part of Israeli society is not in the leadership anymore, but I think we can still make a few suggestions. However, Charles, opening the Zoom to Brazil, to the rest of the Jewish world, Jews in North America, in Australia, in Europe, United Kingdom, France, in Germany more recently, and of course in Latin America, suddenly this Zoom opening puts me back in the majority, I think. Because even if in Israel we are now a large minority, I think that within the Jewish world, where the Jewish world is heading, is very much our way as well. And the reason why we wrote Jews and Words initially in English has to do with the fact that we wanted to strike a conversation with the Jewish world, by the way, also with the non-Jewish world, with everybody who cares about their own legacy and tradition, but want to keep it at their own terms as people of the 21st century. In this respect, I feel that the cousinhood with people like you and your friends, listeners out there, with many of my friends, my Jewish friends in North America and in Europe and in Australia, this cousinhood is becoming extremely important for Israelis like myself. It is no longer the centripetal Zionism of let everybody come to the state of Israel, let us all converge together. It's now a centrifugal Zionism. We Israelis want to be part of the Jewish world and of the world in general. For this, we need to step away from ultra-orthodoxy and from ultra-nationalism. We need to be members of the global family.
I forgot to open my mic. So I think there's a couple of questions here, and one of them is about, it's following up the question of Jewish education today, right? Some people here are asking, okay, which kind of texts should be given to our children? Is that the Bible? Is that perhaps some philosophy, secular texts? And then together with this is really about how can reform and liberal streams of Judaism can increase their strength. So I'm packing the whole thing in the same question because right now we have this whole discussion here in Brazil about a pluralist education, whether schools should have only one stream of education, only Orthodox or only Reform, or to be broad. And I would love to hear a little bit more from you. Okay, which kind of texts should we bring to our children nowadays?
Excellent questions. I would definitely begin with the Bible. I would begin with trying to teach your children Hebrew, but not in any way that will make them hate Hebrew all their lives. I met a few people like that. Hebrew is very beautiful, and the Bible, the Tanakh in Hebrew, is incomparable in its beauty. But even without reading it in Hebrew, there are many times suggest read to and with kids when they are small. There are interesting ways of doing it. By the time that are teenagers, I would go for the poetry of the Parad. I would go for the deeply erotic, sensual poetry of the golden age of Sephardic in the late Middle Ages. And then all the way into the Haskalah, the great writers of the early and the late 20th century. The great early writers of Zionism like Bialik and Lasser are part of the bottom line, perhaps the most important part of it. I hope you can hear me, is do not force them. No, I cannot hear you now because your mic is off again.
Oh, now it's better. It was not so good, but now it's much better.
Okay. So shall I continue where I stopped or a little before? Okay. Do not force it on them. Make them love it. Teach them or read to them what you love yourself. Not what is supposed to be important, but what you love yourself. If I love the Song of Songs, this is what I would share with my kids when they get to the right age. If I like a few Talmudic episodes, not all of the Talmud, a few hand-picked Talmudic episodes, some of them are mentioned in our book or quoted in our books, go for it. Put it on the family dinner table, make them argue about it. Get into a family argument about the Talmudic story of the oven of Achnai. Medieval poetry and modern Jewish literature, everything about it is for you to choose from. And finally, in order to be a Jewish family who loves books and educates, gives their kids a good textual education, it's not only about Jewish writers or Jewish artists. Jorge Luis Borges is for me one of the best Jewish readings in my life. I love to pass it on to my kids. There is something deeply Jewish about him, also about the late, recently, Umberto Eco. So yes, get your kids into these library labyrinths. Let them walk around without guidance, with guidance. Let them enjoy it. The most important thing, even if you read to them Dr. Seuss, the most important thing is that you love what you read to them.
Thanks, Fania. I will now give the word to Noemi. She has a question for you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is my mic open?
Yes.
Can you?
I can hear you, Noemi.
Okay, Fania, I'm very curious about something that I concluded upon reading your book with your father, which is, can anybody choose to be a Jew? Like, I can choose to be a Nietzschean or a Kantian. I can also choose, not me, because I was born a Jew, but if a person was not born a Jew and decides to be Jew because he likes the books about Judaism, he likes the Bible, he likes the Talmud, and he wants to follow the continuation of texts about Judaism, can he become a Jew?
Absolutely. I don't think there is a future to Judaism. There is no future to the Jewish nation if anyone who is interested is not completely welcome to come in. My father, if I may quote him again, has an even more extreme response. When people ask him who is a Jew, his answer is, there is only one definition. Anybody who is meshigene enough, crazy enough, to call himself Jewish is Jewish. That's the only. Is he a good Jew or a bad Jew? That's up to the next Jew next to him to decide.
Okay, good. So nothing to do with having a Jewish mother or circumcision, right?
No, a Jewish mother and circumcision are the special bonuses for those born into the faith. You could say the bonuses or otherwise, but I would definitely welcome to the club. You know, textual Judaism is exactly this. Anybody who enters the library, who enters the labyrinth, who wants to join the conversation, should be welcome to join the conversation. I'm not sure we can have everybody in Israel. It's getting a little crowded in here, but everybody should be welcome to join the club. I think this is the deep sense and meaning of Judaism, even though the Orthodox would say that you need to take a great many more duties on yourself. I respect that, but for me, the only duty you need to take upon yourself, if you want to become Jewish, is to be a reader, preferably a good reader.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Fania. It's
Great.
very nice for me to hear it.
All right. Thank you, Noemi. Thank you. I will move to Rogério. He's a rabbi today with us, and I'll ask Rogério to place his question.
Hi, Fania. How are you?
Hi, Rogério. Very well. How are you?
I'm great. This is the kind of rabbi that would love to sit next to you in the airplane.
It would be my pleasure, Rogério.
So you spoke about the way Jewish children are taught to disagree with the authorities, to disagree with the text, to disagree with God, the tradition of asking toughing questions, and you claim that these are not rhetorical questions, and I'm not convinced. And my counterexample, which I think is one of the weirdest parts of our tradition, is the way the Rasha is answered on the Seder, on the Passover Seder, right? So the Rasha, I think, asks the best question: what does this all mean, right? And the way the Rasha is, the evil child is answered is, like, you're not part of us. If you had been there, we would have left you in Egypt. But also we have another phenomenon that is valid in many aspects of Jewish life and of the relationship between diaspora and Israel, and that is that those who pride themselves on the Jewish tradition of dialogue and debate are the same people who are trying to close that possibility, who are either passing laws in the Knesset saying that if you disagree with this or that, then outlawing the possibility of disagreement, but also in the diaspora saying that there's one normative way of being Jewish and of relating with the state of Israel. So I wanted to get back to you and ask if, by recognizing that our tradition of disagreeing is actually not that deep, and actually we need to learn how to disagree in a civil way and how to honor the opinion of the other, and see what you have to say about that.
These are all very excellent points, and I will start with one of your later points, Rogeri. What I've been trying to say gently here is that my father and myself and you and Charles are better guardians of the Jewish tradition than the extremist rabbis and politicians who are trying to silence the argument in Israel. They are not good guardians of Jewish tradition. We are, I have to say it out loud. So this goes without saying, that any law that the Knesset, today is very right-wing, most right-wing Knesset we ever had, is trying to enact to make people shut up about controversial issues, is anti-Jewish, and also, not only anti-Jewish, it's not going to work. There's no way in which you are going to silence the Israelis, both Jews and Arabs. We are not a silenced people, not a silenced people. It's not going to happen. Now, the question of the Haggadah of Passover is not my favorite text. It has a lot of things in it that I find not very appealing, but the part of it intended for children is very beautiful in my mind. It's a book that was exactly meant to be the family table book in the greatest feast of the year, Passover, to go with the food straight into the memories of young children, to make them remember all their lives. When you eat your chicken soup together with singing one of the Haggadah songs, which are also meant for kids, you will remember the taste and the flavor of the text all your life. There are two sets of questions in the Haggadah, as you know well. One of them is the kushiyot, literally the hard ones, in which, of course, the tiniest kids are supposed to sing this. They learn it by heart. But note that kushiyot, the same word, comes from the Talmud, where it's really a difficult question. So the kids are playing with a toying with difficult questions in this song in the Haggadah, the four kushiyot. When they are big, they will be encouraged to say something new or to create difficult questions. This is one thing. I'm not going to idealize it. I will get back to it in a second. Second set of questions, the famous four sons, the wise one or clever one, the evil one, naughty one, the innocent or naive, and finally the one who doesn't know how to ask questions, the only kid out of 8 askers who cannot ask questions, so you have to tell him. The evil one, the Rasha, is my personal favorite. And my interpretation is slightly different from yours, because I think that the way the father, the head of the Seder, answered back to that son is exactly the way it's healthy to talk to teenagers. The Rasha is a teenager. The naughty son is a teenager. He talks exactly like my teenager sons used to talk a couple of years ago. So what's all this to you? To you, not to me. It's yours, not me. What about it? And so on. And you simply answer.
Fania, the question doesn't say you, not me. The question just says, what does this all mean to you? Right? And then the father,
what is this work? Yes. Or this.
The father is removing himself. Right? The naughtiness is on the ear of the beholder.
The naughtiness may be on the ear of the beholder, but the way, even the response, which is quite an aggressive response, means that even the evil son deserves an answer, and even the evil son has a place around the family table. You know, for a long time, ever since I wrote my first book, second book actually, Israelis in Berlin, when I lived in Berlin, I was wondering, what was it like to be a teenager in the shtetl in East Europe, in extreme poverty, a Jewish teenager, going to this dismal cheder or yeshiva or working hard with your poor parents, and you see the goyim across the street. You see them down in the city square, singing and dancing, and Christmas trees and blonde, beautiful girls, and so on. What was it like to be a Jewish teenager all those years of diaspora? Since teenagers were teenagers. And the Haggadah gave me a little bit of the answer, I have to say. The Haggadah told me that there are techniques of accommodating even the most provocative kids. And Haben Harasha, the evil son, is a provocative kid. I think that at the end of the day, he remains around the table.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for these good questions.
Thank you, Rogério and Fania. It was an awesome exchange. I will pass the word to Michel here, who is waiting for his question.
Hi, Michel.
Shalom, shalom. I have many questions, but I could write a book about the questions I have for you. But you brought some points me that drove me to think about something. You think that the Ashkenazi Zionism in Israel tried to put the diaspora in a kind of exile. I mean, to put the diaspora in the galut, and didn't hear so much things about diaspora. And now the diaspora, I mean, with these new governments we have in Israel in the last years, the diaspora that they try to put in the galut, I mean, the diaspora they try to put in the exile, are just bringing things that we thought, I mean, our Ashkenazi secular Zionism thought that these things were not relevant anymore, and suddenly we see this government acting like the diaspora. We thought the diaspora have to act. I mean, this new diaspora is the old diaspora that's becoming more and more relevant, and we become the minority because we thought this diaspora didn't exist anymore. It's my first question. My second question is that you use yes.
Maybe I answer your first question and then get to your second one. Is that all right?
Okay.
About the relationship between Zionism and diaspora, I did not use the word Ashkenazi. I don't use it very much. I've got in myself some Sephardi blood and some Ashkenazi blood. It's much more mixed than one thing.
But when you talk about the Pesach, you talk about the soup.
What about chicken soup?
I don't. Okay, that's the point.
I can also talk to you about Reime, the wonderful Moroccan dish.
Yeah. That's the point. Yeah.
Okay, we'll exchange recipes later. So, specifically Ashkenazi, you know, there was a very powerful Zionism of Jews from Iraq and from North Africa and from Yemen. Also said the same thing, that country people have to return from exile to the land of Israel because exile was a sad state of affairs, a sad place and a sad era, and now we have an alternative to exile. So the idea of denying the diaspora was very prevalent in early Zionism. It has changed, and I think it has changed for the better. When I was growing up, nobody told me a thing about Jewish communities in the world today, in my time. I learned history, of course, up to the Holocaust, but after the Holocaust comes the state of Israel, and this is the happy end of the story. Now that I know much more, young Israelis today are far more global travelers. They are regaining the old Jewish tradition of being nomads, in a good way, I think. They are high-tech nomads, but they're nomads. And as we discover a network of the Jewish world, we want to be part of it in two ways. First of all, a lot of Israelis want to be abroad. They don't necessarily want to be in Israel. They go to Berlin. I wrote a book about it, Israelis in Berlin. Berlin has a lot of charm and attraction for young Israelis. They go to America, they go to Israel. And secondly, Israel itself should be considered one very prominent spot on the map of the Jewish world. Very prominent, but part of the network. Israel should not aim anymore to swallow the network. Take it all in. We don't have enough room, even if we wanted to, by the way. We should be part of the network and perhaps make exports, suggestions to the network. Jews and Words is a book that is suggesting something to the Jewish world. It's not suggesting, come to Israel quickly, dispel the diaspora. It's suggesting that we should rethink our continuity for the coming millennium. And this is something that has to be done together in conversation between Jews around the world. I hope this partially answers your question about the diaspora.
Yes, yes. And the second question I wanted to ask you is about history. This word history is a very complicated word in the Orthodox world, and even in more conservative places of the right-wing Zionism. They say, and we can take it from Yerushalmi, that we don't have history, but we have memory. How do you think it's possible to talk about such a very important word for the historians with people that don't understand history as a concept of the Jewish world?
Well, you know, I'm not part of these people, and I respect the famous distinction between Jewish history and Jewish memory, but this is not based on how we do history today, let alone memory, because today history is not what it was 50 years ago when this distinction was created. Now we do oral history, we use stories, we use literature, we use art, we write about the history of ordinary lives. Memory has become part of history. It's no longer a dichotomy between memory and history. So yes, I am a professional historian. By the way, I wrote my doctoral work, and much of my research is not on Jewish topics at all. It's about the European Enlightenment. And I think that the categories of general history totally apply to the Jewish case. For example, one of my favorite teaching topics, the history of books and reading, can create wonderful insights about Jewish history. What I did in my initial presentation, when I spoke about the little boy who goes back from school to home every day, thereby creating a sociology of literacy in his family, in the Jewish community. This is history of reading. This is not part of the inner Jewish story and memory. This is an external view at what made the Jews so special. So I love history, and I think that we can use its tools also to go within the deep mentality of Jews, but don't forget literature. The other half of Jews and Words is literature. This is what makes us able to say that the Bible is a truthful set of books, a truthful literary collection, not because it is archaeologically or historically factual, but because it knows a great deal about human nature, as all good literature does. So we have not just the truth of memory and the truth of history, we also have the truth of literature, of good literature.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. I have a question here from the audience. I'll try to adapt a little bit. It's from Danielle Feldman. The question is related to the use of Twitter and the contemporary social media. So it's interesting because we are talking of all these texts, of these books, and things that we can go deeper and reflect about. But also, it seems that most of the communication today is done within a phrase, 10 words, and every message has to be conveyed in very short phrases. And it seems that even you, Fania, has a Twitter account, and you are communicating with Twitter.
I confess, yes.
Right?
And you are all join both my Facebook and my Twitter accounts, but I don't have Instagram.
Okay. So, but the thing is, if you think about that, the BDS has used Twitter and Facebook. Stand With Us has used Twitter and Facebook. It seems to be not only a cultural war, it seems to be a cultural war done in the social media in a very specific way. And it seems to me that now you are coming to us and say, okay, let's try to reflect a little better. Let's try to go deeper in the texts, etc. So how is it possible to foster a dialogue when so many sides are using so shorter messages and trying to get the debate won in sometimes very superficial ways?
You know, the internet is a strange thing. It's like the print revolution fast forwarded. A very, very fast development, which we cannot always account for. You know, I've been writing about the internet for the last 10 years, and it's changing all the time. Very difficult to say anything conclusive at this point in time. The social networks are doing a lot of good and a lot of harm. And there is no observer right now who can tell you directly what exactly is happening. I can tell you what's happening from an Israeli perspective. I can tell you that the social networks, especially the social networks, also other parts of the internet, are slowly demolishing the authority of the ultra-Orthodox rabbis. They cannot maintain their posture, their stance, their halo as holy men in the world of the social networks for many reasons. The internet is like a microwave. It is infiltrating into the deepest ultra-Orthodox communities. You can't bring in a book by Spinoza into those yeshivas, but somehow the microwave of the internet is getting there and changing lives and changing communities in a way we can only guess. I have been prophesizing for the last couple of years in Israel that within the coming decade or so, we shall have a Haredi and ultra-Orthodox spring in Israel. They will come out of the walls. It might happen very quickly. And the internet has a very powerful role in this. Also, social protest. You remember that only about 4 years ago, in the heady summer of 2011, there was a global urban movement of social protest that pretty much began in Tel Aviv. It began in Madrid, but Tel Aviv took it up and did it very beautifully. It was a Facebook social protest. And unlike the Arab Spring, which failed, it was also a Facebook phenomenon, the social protest in Israel is here to stay. It already had some very concrete results and successes. It brought people into the Knesset. It changed legislation. People are monitoring the political and economic situation much better through Facebook than they did before. Now, Charles, I have to agree with you that Twitter is statement. And for me, it is an exercise in creativity equivalent to writing a haiku poem. It's a good exercise, not bad. Sometimes less is more. But if you are worried, as we all are, about the shortening attention span of young people, it's true. You know, I have twin boys that are 20 years old. I can watch their attention spans. I can see how they are multitasking. I think their brains are wired slightly differently than mine or my parents. The new type of feed for the human brain. I do not think that the young people are less intelligent, probably more. I don't think they are less creative, probably more. They might write excellent haiku poems when they grow up.
Thank you, Fania. I think we have more 8 minutes or so. So I'll try to move up here to wrapping up a certain way, and I want to follow up on the question of Michelle to you, and actually trying to bring up a question that came in a certain way from Sergio Storch, who's also with here now. And the question is about, okay, you said about how Israel has to be part of a network. Israel should not swallow the whole Jewish universe to it. But then I'll ask you what we Jews here in Brazil, in US, other countries, should be doing nowadays to engage with Israel, right? Probably in the past we would think that the issues that occur in Israel has to be dealt only by Israelis, and what we have to do, our duty here as Jews in the diaspora, is really to support Israel, and that's it. But it seems that what you are saying is that there is room for a stronger engagement from our part. So I'd love to hear a little bit more on that end.
Yes, I would say it far more clearly. Please intervene. Please come over us what you think. Please meddle with us. You know, Charles, the beauty of globalization is that no nation is an island anymore. That all nations are interconnected legally, constitutionally, morally, in terms of communication, you name it. And the Jewish world was always a bit of an internet, and people always told each other what they think. There was in the early decades of the State of Israel a kind of odd silence from Jews abroad. You know, they sent money, they sent donations, but they tried not to tell Ben-Gurion what to do. Who would dare telling Ben-Gurion what to do? They did not tell Golda Meir what to do. I wish they did. Nowadays, things have changed. And if you feel that you have any stakes in this enterprise, that you have any cards on the table, I, and Israelis like myself, would love you to step forward and tell us your thoughts. Of course, Israelis are sovereign to make their own decisions, but we are not an island in any way. And certainly when it comes to the inner Jewish conversation, you know, I'm saying that Jews are an open club, but we do have a very open, very public inner conversation. This is where I would like to hear far more voices from my cousins overseas, talking to my extremist brothers at home, because I'm far closer to you than I am to the settlers on the hilltops and the rabbis in the Jerusalem yeshivas. I need your voice in order to make my voice less of a minority today. So my answer is, by all means, please step in and intervene. Microphone?
I'll go for our last question, okay? And this is a question that I'm bringing from Lillian. And I think it's a nice question to wrap it up. When we read your book, it's really a book of two scholars writing about the Jewish history, right? And at the same time, you have this message of very, very horizontal network of Jews around the globe. And so the question is do you have to be a scholar to participate in dialogue? Any Jew can participate in dialogue. What is the difference between being a scholar and not being a scholar when you participate in the dialogue?
Well, you don't have to be a scholar, you don't have to be a writer, you don't have to be an artist, you have to be a reader with a voice. You know, this is going to be a very interesting century for Jews, not to mention a very interesting millennium. Here in Israel, it's already getting dark. You can see around me that darkness is descending, and I cannot reach out for the light because there is a dog sitting on my lap. Luca, say hi. Yes. But there is no darkness descending on Jewish history or on Israeli history. I'm an optimist, and I can explain. I'm a rational optimist. I think that the conversation will only grow. It will grow because we have the digital means to make it happen, like what you and I are doing today. Nobody could do it, 10 years ago? Nobody could do it 10 years ago, not in this way, not open to a public of people out there who are listening and either nodding their heads or not, but taking part in the conversation. The internet, as I said before, is an extremely Jewish, even Talmudic tool, and it's serving beautifully anybody who loves to read, write, argue, make jokes, cats, dogs. I see a very conversational, discursive future for Israelis, for Jews, for human beings in general. It's true that our kids are writing and reading very short pieces of text, but they are writing and reading more than we did in terms of amount, in terms of quantity, at any age that I can think of. You know, I read Tolstoy. My kids tried. It was a bit long. But they are in front of texts all their life, every day, all day. Producing, sending, receiving. This is bound to create something good. Good poetry, good literature, good philosophy, and a good global conversation. I would like the Jews to remain not the only literate ones around, the way we were in the Middle Ages, but I would like the Jews to remain an inspiration and very active participants in the global conversation. And I think we are all set for this, as this conversation has proven to me. So I really want to thank you, Charles, and your colleagues, and the people who asked excellent questions. It would be delightful to keep talking, so you are all welcome to my Facebook, the Jews and Words Facebook page, my own, and also Twitter. If you like haiku, this is the means for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fania, for this awesome conversation. It was awesome to talk with you, and it's great to associate a face to a book and have this direct contact. I also want to thank everybody who could come to stay at home, not to go to any other thing, and to engage in this conversation. And especially those who engaged in questions and were very provocative of Fania at this point. I also want to invite everybody to go to our page, pinat.com.br, Pinat Brasil, which is what is organizing this event. So thank you very much, and I'd love to hear more from you in the near future.
It will be a pleasure. All the best. Goodbye to everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.